You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Bupp has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Bupp.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, where our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is real estate expert Paul Massey. Now, Paul got to start some 30-plus years ago as a broker for CBRE. Now, a few short years later, he and a colleague went on to found Massey Knakal Realty Services. This company became the New York metropolitan area's dominant commercial investment sales brokerage firm. With over 225 employees serving more than 200,000 property owners, Massey Knakal Realty Services was consistently ranked New York's #1 investment sales firm in volume for 14 consecutive years. Now, at the end of 2014, Cushman Wakefield acquired Massey Knakal for $100 million. Now, following his successful exit, Paul went on to run as a mayoral candidate for New York City, primarily focusing on education, housing, and homelessness, while also providing solutions for how to improve quality of life in the city. Now, moving forward, in July of 2018, he launched a new commercial brokerage firm, B6 Real Estate Advisors, short for Building by Building, Block by Block. The investment sales and capital advisory firm specializes in middle market, $1 million to $200 million, and employs a distinct territory network model that ensures sub-market expertise for its agents, along with an owner-aligned philosophy and a technology-forward platform. Now, here's what you're going to learn in our call here today with Paul. You'll learn how he got his start as an intern at CBRE, which ultimately became the launching pad of the multi-million-dollar organization he ended up building. You'll learn about the path that led he and his firm to being the responsible selling brokerage for nearly 1/3 of all of New York City commercial real estate sales. You're going to learn about the calculated reasons behind the decision to solely focus on work with sellers only versus buyers and sellers like a lot of brokerage firms do. You're going to learn how Paul established his company as a leader by providing endless value on a regular basis. You learn how he procured an absolute buy-in from every single one of his team members when launching his very first startup venture. You're going to learn about the process of making the $100 million exit to Cushman Wakefield and what that experience was like. Additionally, what was the catalyst behind jumping back into another startup venture with B6? You're going to learn about his desire to run for mayoral candidate for New York back in 2017 and what that firsthand experience was like. You're going to learn why raising interest rates is one of the biggest fears that stays top of mind for Paul, and much, much more. And so with that, guys, I'm excited to get on the show with Paul. But before we do, I have a few quick housekeeping items I'd like to run through. Like I do every week, I like to share with you my one personal and one professional best from the prior week. Now, as far as the personal best goes, October has been a month of kids' birthday parties. And, both my boys, they have an October birthday. My youngest, Julian, is October 4th, and my oldest, Jackson, is October 18th. And so we just celebrated Jackson's 6th birthday party this past Friday. And I have to say that Jackson probably spent a minimum of 12 hours, if not more than that, assembling the 5 or 6 Lego sets that he got for his birthday. I mean, this kid's an absolute animal when it comes to Lego sets. In fact, we noticed a couple years ago when we got him his very first Lego set, as I actually sat there to assemble that with him, that he took a liking to it, and he very much has an engineer brain. I helped him with that very first Lego set. Again, this is probably 3 years ago. I have not helped him ever since, and he will not let me help him. In fact, we go as far as actually testing him and getting him very advanced Lego sets and let him sit there and see if he can work through the challenge of assembling them, even when they're made for ages 11 to 14. We've actually got him a few Lego sets that have 1,000+ pieces that are made for teenagers, and he'll zoom right through them. I mean, he'll sit there for 4 or 5 hours at a time on one really big Lego set, and literally he'll be so exhausted by the end, he'll get the Lego set done and he'll literally fall asleep. And he'll go on the couch and fall asleep, go to his bed and fall asleep. So it's pretty cool to watch at. You're trying to find what your kids, what they really enjoy at that age, and what they're really drawn to, and what their strengths are. And definitely that is one of his. He's very patient and very methodical with his approach to putting these things together. So that's always cool to watch him do that. And he's got a couple more sets he hasn't put together yet. In addition to that, my parents actually came in town from Pennsylvania. They visited for the week, and they were here as well to help celebrate his birthday with him. As far as a professional best, one of the recent changes that we made here in our company, Sunrise Communities, which is our property management arm. If you guys are not aware, if you haven't been following some of the videos I've been doing, we are actually bringing our property management back in-house. Actually, we're doing it right now. It's happening as we speak. And we had outsourced it for the last year, had a not so great experience with it, and have been building a very robust infrastructure on our property management side. And one of the changes that we've made in this property management structure, pertains to mobile home parks, which is what one of our core investment vehicles is typically in a mobile home park, you have an on-site community manager that runs the day-to-day operations. Normally, that on-site community manager is also the one that's in charge of managing the sales and marketing efforts for that particular community. And what that could mean is, homes that we might have for sale in that community, or homes that we might have for rent inside that community. They're in charge of putting the ads up on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and all the other different digital platforms that are out there. In addition to that, they're also in charge of actually receiving those inbound calls, those leads that are coming in that have an interest in whatever available units we have at that given time. Now, the challenge with that is actually managing. Theoretically, that sounds very simple to do, but managing a million different personality types in all these different communities, ensuring that they're actually getting the ads up, that they're actually following through with the calls and the appointments, the quality control, it's very challenging to do. And so what we had decided to do is actually put send all of our marketing, sales and marketing through one funnel. And so we've actually hired a dedicated individual. It's going to end up turning into a team, but right now it's one person, very skilled individual who basically handles all the postings for all of our communities, all the available properties that we have. In addition to that, he is the first line, the first filter, I guess you could say, of all those inbound leads. And he sets the appointment accordingly with the on-site manager. And so he has each on-site manager's calendar availability, and essentially will handle the initial sales process. Will filter out anyone that's just not going to meet the general qualifications. If it seems like they will meet the general qualifications of our community, he will go ahead and set an appointment on the calendar of our community manager there on site to show that property. Okay, so now what we've done is we simply eliminated all the the challenges associated with quality control of how those phone calls are going. We record every single phone call. In addition to that, are the ads getting posted? Yes, absolutely, the ads are getting posted. We can go to one source and find out whether or not all these pieces of the puzzle are coming together. So that's been a massive change for the better for our company, and we're really looking forward to kind of how that helps us fuel this property management organization. So with that, guys, moving on here. If you love what we're doing here at the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, please take a moment, go subscribe if you haven't done so already, and also leave a rating and review on iTunes. This really helps us grow the show and helps us attract awesome guests like Paul that we have here today. Like I do every week, I like to read one of the reviews that were just left. And this one is from screen name SB071, and they say, best commercial real estate podcast. Kevin is excellent and asks all the guests great questions. The guests are a varied mix of different investor types. This is a great podcast for those ramping up in commercial real estate investing. Alrighty, so thank you so much. Really appreciate you leaving that review there. And guys, again, it really helps us grow the show. So please take a moment, go do that, and I'll be sure to give you a shout out in an upcoming episode. Lastly, before we get on to the show with Paul, just want to remind you of the free 30-minute phone call that I offer each and every Friday. This is where you can essentially get on the phone with me, ask me anything your heart desires about real estate investing, okay? I've been doing these for many years now, and it gives me a way to connect with my listeners and to get to meet you and just talk shop. Whether you're brand new, just getting started, or you've got 20, 30 years of experience, it doesn't really matter. I really enjoy these calls. It's a way for us to kind of think of it as a small mastermind together, right? And I can give back, act as a sounding board, and I learn a lot as well. So it's a lot of fun. Again, I do these every Friday. Go to my website, kevinbupp.com, to schedule that call with me. And now, without further ado, let's get on to the part of the show that you guys have been waiting for, which is our interview with Paul Massey. So here we go. Alrighty, guys, it is my honor to introduce my guest for today's show, CEO of B6 Real Estate Advisors, Paul Massey. Paul, how you doing today?
Great, Kev. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks for joining us here. And Paul, what I'd love to do, for those folks that aren't familiar with you, obviously you have a very prominent name in New York City real estate. You've been doing this for many, many years. What I'd love for you to do is take a few minutes and share a little bit about your background with the folks that aren't familiar with you. How you got into this business. Ultimately, some of the things you've done along the way. That we're going to dive a little deeper into that discussion about one of the big exits that you had just a few years back, and then ultimately we'll dive into a deeper discussion of B6 Real Estate Advisors and the founding of that company. But again, would love to start in the personal side of things. So I'm going to pass the mic to you and ask that you share a little bit of a background of yourself.
Sure. Well, I got a summer job at CBRE in my hometown of Boston. Mm-hmm. I was very grateful to get. I met there was an alum who used to come around and make sure we weren't burning the frat house down a couple of times a year. And he got me a job, and I saw what the company was, and I loved it. And so when I graduated, I went running back to CB, and the local manager in Boston told me that the office was full and he wasn't going to roll the dice on college kid. So I was crushed, but I went back to my fraternity alum connection, who was a big national accounts officer. And he said, well, that's the bad news. The good news is we're brand new in New York and they'll take anybody down there. And so being so qualified, I went down, and I was one of the first people in CBRE's version of a wheel training program where you'd work for each department and rotate around for a year. And that was great. And by the time I was finishing that up, they were looking for people to sell investment properties, apartment buildings, store buildings. And I volunteered. And also at the same time, a guy named Bob Knakal, who I ultimately partnered and built a business with, showed up. He had also, we didn't know each other, but coincidentally, he had been working for CBRE as a college student. So I'd recommend that for anybody. But we both volunteered and started the investment sales group at CBRE in Midtown Manhattan. We did that for 5 years. And then before we were too old to know better, we went out and did a startup. I think I was 27, Bob was 26, and we kept doing what we were doing, which is selling investment property sales. In New York City, you would have thought that was an institutional and organized business, but back in 1985, that was the Wild West. So we ended up getting lucky and falling into a niche where we repped about 1/3 of everyone who was selling their building in New York City.
Wow.
We sold that business at the end of 2014 in a strategic move to Cushman Wakefield, and then spent 3.5 years there. Had an interim period of time where I was chasing political aspirations, but ultimately at the end of our contracts, I decided with some of my former partners to start up a business that was very similar to our first one, but also focusing on debt brokerage, combining teams of sales brokers and debt brokers. Again, more of a strategic approach, kind of the way we think the world's headed. And we formed B6, which stands for our urban focused approach, which is building by building, block by block. It's B6.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate you filling in some of those gaps for us. I'd love to back up a little bit and just talk about the transition from CBRE to founding of your own firm there. What were the big voids? I know you said it was the wild, wild west, and it was kind of cowboy land, but what were the big voids that you saw that ultimately weren't being met by CBRE or any of the other larger firms that were in the city at that point in time?
I kind of wish I could take credit for being a strategic planner at that point, but we were just having a great time doing what we were doing. But there were things that were happening that had we thought about them, really screamed opportunity. One was the big shops weren't looking at that investment sales kind of middle market business, probably $2 million to $200 million, as a standalone business opportunity. They were thinking about bigger institutional buildings. Because we were young, we would typically only get hired by sellers of smaller to mid-sized buildings. So we again, by luck, ended up in a very fragmented, fractured niche.
Mm-hmm.
Another lucky stroke for us was that people have a perception, or especially back in the day, had a perception of Manhattan as the center of the world, and that the boroughs were effectively less appealing stepchildren. But the reality is there are 200,000 investment properties in New York. It's the biggest market in the country. It's a massive market, but there are only 24 to 25,000 buildings south of 96th Street in Manhattan. So we were surprised to find, and people didn't realize, there are 55,000 buildings in Queens. So apartment buildings, store buildings, office buildings. So Queens itself is a massive market. There are 88,000 buildings in Brooklyn. You always hear this, that wow. Brooklyn as a standalone would be the third largest city in the country. So not only are these very dense areas, but they're massive land areas of investment properties. So we filled up our Manhattan territories. We operate in a territory system, which CB taught us what we think is an advantage, where we put an agent in every submarket, every neighborhood, east side, west side, village, and they encourage that. And we knew our markets better, made us more competitive, more helpful to the clients. We knew the zoning, we knew the tenancy, we knew the comps in terms of sales. But we filled up Manhattan and then had to make a decision. Do we branch into other disciplines within the brokerage world, property management, leasing? We decided to stick to our knitting. So we went out, and one of our partners volunteered to go out to Queens, and we set up shop there, and then Brooklyn, and then the Bronx and Staten Island. And so we were in Brooklyn before it was Brooklyn. So that was the second big competitive advantage, that we looked at those markets in a very micro manner, and it gave us a competitive advantage ahead of the pack.
Other than the fragmentation of this of the middle market that you guys were going after, and especially respective to the boroughs, what else do you attribute to the quick traction that you and your partner were able to gain? I mean, obviously you were trained very well from CBRE. I mean, world-class training there. So you were coming out of a good place, and you had the tools and the resources per se. However, you're still kind of wet behind the ears when it comes to really becoming the primary, I guess, investment sales brokerage that was going to be focusing in this middle market space. And so talk to me about gaining traction. You're still in your probably your mid to late 20s at that point in your life. And you're the young guy, right? I mean, I'm sure that you had to probably work a little harder, be a little more persistent than some of the more established firms. So I'd love to hear you speak about just how you guys got in there and just got your hands dirty and gained traction fairly quickly.
Well, we did get a great launch and great training at CB, and I still feel today that would be the case. That's a great company. Another thing that they taught us was to, if at all possible, work on the sell side as a broker. So only represent sellers. So we really tried to focus on that. The buyer representation business is a very difficult business. We frankly don't understand. But what we decided to do is exclusively represent sellers. A lot of firms, including national firms, represent tenants, represent buyers. So they can be on both sides of a trade very frequently. To us, that's a major, major conflict and a problem. And I don't know how you negotiate that. So at one point early on in our company's career, when we were, we gained traction over 26 years. So we're overnight success after 26 years. But the minute we formally told our clients that we were no longer doing any buyer representation whatsoever, they loved it. I think that more than 60 or 65% of our clients picked us because they knew we're agnostic to outcome other than maximum proceeds for them. So really, I think that's the way the world has gone and the world has transitioned to. But I think that picking who you represent and being very clear about that was a second huge competitive advantage.
Yeah.
A third advantage that was more our idea than anyone. So this would be one place where I would say we probably were smart and all the rest of it was a lot of luck. But because we had troops out in the field, we could feed the mothership all the data that was out there. So we were, early AI before even that expression existed. We fed data back about cap rates, about gross rent multipliers vis-a-vis residential property, development comparables, land sale comparables, and we packaged this up and then gave it to the marketplace for free. And in doing so, we not only fell into a large market share position, but we were one of the trusted authorities about that market. And so we became the authority, or one of the authorities. So it allowed people to go into markets they hadn't been into, Queens, Brooklyn, neighborhoods in the Bronx, and they could pay up, but they knew they weren't paying up by a multiple. They were just paying up as much as they had to break records, to entice people to sell. But they were comfortable doing so because they had a sense of where they were in the pricing scale. So that was work that our company did and provided to our clients way before they had all these companies that were providing this now. Now you can get that. Now anybody can lease that information for free. So I think being cutting edge in terms of data is always a way to go.
Yeah, but even then, and so I guess let me just clarify here. You provided that data also to all the property owners, correct? I mean, just so that they were educated. Even then, the less sophisticated property owner, even with all the resources that exist today, it's still a somewhat complex set of data for them to get in. To go to any one of these random websites and extract what's real and what's not real, right? I mean, so I think that the value that you were providing them, I mean, it puts you leaps and bounds ahead of the competition. I mean, that's what I'm gathering here. Just, you talk about building the instant trust and credibility. Like, you guys are giving stuff away that is incredibly valuable. They know that it took a lot of time and resources to gather that information. And at the end of the day, it allows them to be an educated seller and get, what they feel is a premium dollar for their asset when they're, when the time comes to sell. So I love every bit of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, you're never going to eliminate human judgment. I think even if the data is available more readily now, someone's got to interpret what that data means.
Yes.
So I think if you consider the fact that every investment property has literally 100 variables, from pure size to zoning to tenancy to even owner contact information, historical sales data, the data piles up. So someone's got to sort out what the trends are, what it means. And so there's going to be a role for our type of help for a long time.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about the discipline that you had to practice on a regular basis to stay in your lane as far as only representing sellers. Because I'm sure that there was many conversations that you and your partner had of the many different revenue streams that could potentially exist for you to add to the business. And so I'm guessing, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing you had multiple conversations over the years about potentially going down different paths, and how you just avoided that and stayed true to what you were really, really good at.
Well, partly it's a big market, and there's plenty for everybody. So there was always more. There were always ways to grow, but it was a hand-wringing decision about sticking to one side of the trade or the other. And I think from a selfish perspective, if something's priced to market in a hyper-liquid environment like New York is, where lots of folks have the ability to buy, when something's priced to market, there could be 20 bidders, there could be 30 bidders. Do you want to be representing one of those? Your odds of success are not high. Our list to sell ratio when we're on the seller rep side is very, very high. In fluid markets, 70%, 75% of the time there'll be a trade where you'll be paid. And but it really came back to what's in the client's best interest.
Yes.
And the client's best interest is transparency and a clear idea of who's representing who. That's the way of the world, and that's the way the world's headed. Think of the legal world if there wasn't clear transparency about who was representing who.
Oh, yeah, be disastrous. Absolutely. And just a few more things I want to touch on here with the growth of that company before, getting on to B6. And, speaking to, the founding of B6, today you're a proven entity. You've got, again, years of experience underneath your belt, a very successful exit to Cushman and Wakefield. And so attracting the, necessary talent to, become the launch pad of B6 was probably a lot easier than it was when both you and your partner Bob were trying to get traction back after leaving CBRE. And so I'd love to get an idea of how you guys position yourself. Like I know what your approach is, your strategic approach that you were taking to kind of separate yourselves from everyone else and feed the market, part of the market that wasn't being fed. But how did you get everyone else on board with your vision and get them to believe in the two of you and this grandeur vision that you guys had of building this I guess really this real estate outfit that didn't really exist at that point in time?
Well, one of the things that was a big part of the fabric of our first business was that we had very defined sharing metrics between our agents. Mm-hmm. So with a whole bunch of firms, your biggest competitor can be actually sitting next to you. And we always hated that idea. So having geographic territories and having people focusing allowed us to have them share business. Very frequently, agents find business just through their normal course in other submarkets than the one they're in. So we had a way for them to team up, bring the business to the local executor, the local agent who was expert in the market, that helped them win the business, that helped them execute for the client better. We had all these sharing metrics prescribed, meaning fee sharing between them, so that they could make any sharing arrangement they want, kind of like federal rights versus state rights. But if they couldn't quickly, before the project started, come to an agreement on how they were going to share fees, there were company guidelines that set that, and everyone appreciated them, lived to them, so nobody was competing with each other. And the clients saw us hand business back and forth. I think historically we would have 40 to 45% of the time more than one agent or more than one team working on a project, depending on who originated and who executed it. And probably 27 to 28% of the time, business moving from one office to the next, one borough office to the next. So the hopscotch of helping each other as a unified team was critical to our success. So nobody ever left us. In the last 10 years, I think we're in business. I don't think anyone left because that sharing became an annuity. So we never were subject to the talent poaching that was going on in other firms, because if you left us, you were leaving the sharing revenue behind. And that was very unappealing to our folks. And if you've got everyone singing from the same hymn book, working together, not competing with each other, putting the best team on the field, not only do the clients see that, but internally, the culture. I just read a great book about culture that said culture is a byproduct of significant discipline and focus, which I completely agree with. So we could all be at the holiday party together and happy, and the company summer picnic together, and our salesman reward trips, all being side by side, because there was no friction between any of us. We all just wanted each other to be stronger. So it was the classic example, and it's the very similar approach that we're taking at the new company, B6, to be a highly functioning, highly unified team. Clients love it.
Yeah, fantastic. What did Cushman and Wakefield, did they ultimately keep the Massey Knakal Realty Services name, or did they merge it into Cushman and Wakefield?
They merged it into Cushman and Wakefield early on.
How does one, so you built your business on a completely different, not completely different, but a very different philosophy than a Cushman and Wakefield, than a CBRE, than a Marks and Millichap, all these big firms out there. When you talk about representing sellers, there's a relationship there that you guys have built, your team had built over many, many years, established over those years of rapport. How does that transition to a large outfit like a Cushman and Wakefield? What actually are they buying at that point in time, being that they're probably going to merge a lot of the SOPs, into their already integrated system. Generally speaking, I'm asking the question because I don't know how that looks, but I'm sure you do because you're kind of part of it.
Well, the Cushman Wakefield again treated us like gold, and it was a very successful strategic move for them. They were owned at the time by an Italian family, a very wealthy Italian family who make fancy cars. You know the name, and they purchased Cushman probably in the last day of the good market in 2007. So their experience wasn't perfect. They ultimately were looking in 2013 and 14 to exit. They did very successfully, ended up being a very successful investment for them. But at the time they were looking to buy us, they had a significant hole in their capital markets activity in New York City, and that wasn't going to go well. If soon thereafter they were going to market themselves for sale and sell themselves, which they successfully did. They also paid us a relatively high multiple for our business. I think because we were a critical plug-in, but also because they were setting a comp for the next stage of their activity, which was to sell the whole company. So we and some other strategic initiatives that Cushman made set a new high bar for service business comps, and that was helpful to them when they took their entire company to market.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Had you been considering a potential exit prior to them coming to you, or did the timing just align perfectly?
No, we had made a definitive decision.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. We had toyed with exiting in 2007, 2008. I think our partners were thinking at some point a liquidity event would be a good thing. And and so we took ourselves to market. We hired a very, very focused, excellent investment bank and took ourselves to market just the way we sell a building, which is full search, very public, front page of the Wall Street Journal that we were on the market. So we were going to sell because service businesses being on the market don't pull back very well from that exit strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic. So leads me into the next, huge question that I've been waiting to ask is after that exit, after spending, I think was it 27 years building the Massey Knakal Realty Services? Is that how long you had been at it?
Correct. Yep. Okay. 26 years. Yeah.
I know you had a little stint of running for mayor, but I want to get to that. I'm not going to skip over that one, but really, the founding of B6, we're talking a startup. Obviously, you're incredibly experienced. You've been here. You've done that now. You know what you would do differently. And ultimately, I'm sure that you made some of those decisions and integrated it into B6. However, at this point in time, why? That's a big question. Why take on the additional stress of really getting back into a startup company?
I love the day-to-day management and strategic aspect of building a business. I was happy for 30 plus years doing that. I had a great partner in Bob Knakal, who has a fantastic strategic mind, but didn't mind me doing the day-to-day aspect of it. So that was a big happy thing. The other thing that was a big part of growing a services business, any services business, was mentoring young people. So there are a whole boatload of people out there in the market who I always say people all make their own careers, but we had a hand in a whole bunch of careers, and that's the most satisfying thing. And we have that back at B6, where we're launching a whole bunch of young folks into the market. Mm-hmm. We have a strong associates program, which is what we've created for kids either right out of school or just a little bit out of through college. And so we've got all those things back in spades. So we're having a great time.
Okay, fantastic. And then let's talk about your stint for running for mayor. How'd that come about? And give us some insights as to ultimately how that played out in the long run. Yeah.
So New York City, I'm a huge fan, even though I've got the Boston roots. The being here was a fantastic experience. When I came to New York, I thought, let me try this for 6 months, and then I'll convince that guy back in Boston who wouldn't hire me to change his mind. That plan didn't last long because it's just such a big, fun market. And I went to school in upstate New York, so a lot of my friends were here. And so the going home plan.
This didn't happen.
Weird. Yeah. So, but my experience with New York is more than just business. I met my wife here, raised our family here, so I'm a huge New York fan. And we had a string of great leadership in New York, starting with Rudy Giuliani, right at a time that the city was in a very undisciplined place. He took control of the city, improved quality of life, reduced crime radically. It's one of the safest cities in the country. And so we had 8 years of Mayor Giuliani. And then right around 9/11, just when you would have thought, how could we possibly have a follow-up mayor who's that strong and that disciplined, we got Mayor Bloomberg for 12 years. So all in all, we had 20 very different personalities and leadership styles, but both immensely effective. So we had, for most of my life in New York, we had 20 great years of mayors. I can't say that for the current guy. And so when he was coming around for his second term, I decided to step up. I always thought I was Mr. New York based on the business that we had and the platform that we had and the fact that we were in every neighborhood and every market. Uh-huh. But I had a fantastic experience and learned New York in a way that I didn't realize was possible even more, and met folks up and down the food chain in every different neighborhood and market. And they all are in different markets and different neighborhoods in a very big city, but they all love being part of the collective New York. So It was great. It was a great experience. I have to, tip my hat to Cushman Wakefield, who the minute they saw me expressing political aspirations, modified my contract to let me do that. I had their 100% support. And, wow. And so that was a really nice thing. And they completely did the right thing.
That's fantastic. What'd your wife and family and coworkers and associates feel when you made that decision to run?
My wife was apoplectic. She was somehow thought we might semi-retire, and I don't think she's over it yet. But I'll speak for her and say it wasn't nearly as bad as she thought, and
okay.
It was a really positive experience. But the coworkers and friends and everyone got behind it, and we had some great support.
I guess it wasn't that bad because somehow you talked her into starting B6, right? Let you go on a new venture. So
she says this is the lesser of evils.
Yeah, right. Well, fantastic. Well, Paul, I'd love to move into now what I like to call the lightning round of the show, and just 6 very concise questions, looking for very concise answers. And so let's roll into it here. The very first one here: your biggest fear. What is it?
For investors, high interest rates. I remember interest rates early in my career at a much higher level, and when they started driving down, I saw how powerful that was. And I think we've been historically low for a long time. I don't see anything on the horizon, but I'd be worried about that.
Okay. How about one biggest regret?
Don't really have a regret. Just probably would have liked to travel more when I was young. I was kind of hard-headed and driven and wanted to get right at work, but I think I'll make up for that later on in life now.
Okay. Most influential business book?
Without a doubt, Influencing Friends, Dale Carnegie's book.
Yes.
It's just Winning Friends and Influencing People. Just so much fundamental good stuff with a second to Keith Ferrazzi's book Never Eat Alone. It's
that's a great one.
I don't love the title because it sounds mercenary, but the premise of his book is always try and help other people, don't keep score. So he's made a great career being selfless and trying to help others.
Yep. 2 great books. Fantastic. Outside of the daily work grind, what do you do to decompress?
A million hobbies. Love it.
What's the favorite?
I think skiing's the top one.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic.
With the family as much as I can.
Yeah. I love it. We're skiers as well. How about the one thing that you can't live without?
That would be the family, the kids,
Yep.
3 great kids.
Fantastic. And then last one here.
And a great mom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What would your plan be if you decided that you weren't going to be doing what you're doing today, as far as B6 or just real estate business in general?
So there's a camp up at the Cape where we have a beach house, and it helps handicapped kids. I think I'd like to work there at some point, and I don't mean be on the board of it. I mean really just go to work every day with the kids. That'd be a great thing.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've always wanted to do that. Never had the chance. Well, I shouldn't say I didn't have a chance to do it. Just never actually chose that path at a younger age. But like a camp counselor, is that what you're referring to? Actually getting in and helping the kids on a more micro level. Yeah, that's
exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, this has been a lot of fun. You've shared a lot of great information here today, lots of helpful insights to your business, to the growth of the company, to the exit, to the foundation of the new company. And what I'd love to ask of you is if you just had one final golden nugget of advice or wisdom that you could leave with our listeners today that may inspire and motivate them as they progress in their real estate career, what would that one last golden nugget be?
I think since so many of them are successful and probably some budding investors out there, the more focused you are, the more disciplined you are in your approach to investing, the better off you're going to be.
I absolutely love it. Paul, what's the best place to reach you and find out more about what you're doing at B6?
Yeah, feel free to contact us at b6realestateadvisors.com. Happy to help you with anything New York or just talk business building.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Is there anything else that we might not have hit on that you feel of relevance that you think it's important for our listeners to know? If so, please feel free.
Yep. Just if you haven't recently, come visit New York. Greatest city out there.
It absolutely is. We're actually heading up there here in a couple of months. Neither one of my boys have seen the lighting of the Christmas tree. So very much, I haven't been to the city in at least 6 or 7 years. So me personally, I'm taking you up on your advice.
please come by. I'll go check out the Christmas tree with you.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Well, Paul, thank you again for coming. And guys, thank you to each and every one of you for tuning into this week's show. And until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.